And I have the pleasure to have the Indian Wind Power um, Association. And here we have as our speaker Mr. Rajsekhar Budhavarapu. I'm sorry for my pronunciation. Well, we're happy to have India here as well, also with ambitious targets we know from the past years. And now we look forward to hearing from India firsthand what India is going to do and how the situation is in at this point of time. Do we have Mr. Rajsekhar? He's still muted? No, he's not muted.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Stephen. And thank you for pronouncing my family name, a difficult name, well. Thanks. I'm trying to see how I can put this up and share the presentation. And I think I'm just about to do that. It's so, yeah, is my presentation up? And I'll just make it full screen. Yeah, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, gentlemen, and we are honored to be part of this presentation and present the India perspective as to where we are and how the COVID affected the first half of this whole year and what is the future direction ahead. So we titled it as Indian Wind Energy Landscape, Way Forward Post COVID-19. This presentation structure is essentially very simple. The first is a snapshot of what is the installations in this year vis-a-vis the last year and what the government targets are and have they changed, have they been reviewed, where we are. Give you a perspective as to how the tender biddings have been happening in India. As you know, since 2017, we have been going through reverse tender biddings. Give you a perspective of where the tariffs are and how they are moving. Very specifically trying to address as to how the COVID-19 situation clearly affected India and this wind energy sector. And a majority of the focus of this presentation is in terms of as to what are the way forward initiatives that the government has thought about, and that's broadly laid across in three broad categories where wind is the central role, is in terms of hybrids, RTC power, RTC standing for round the clock power, and offshore wind. So in terms of the installations and the status as the Government of India targets, so first the installation. So the first circle that you see, this is around 2 gigawatts, 2.1 gigawatts that was installed last year across majoritarily 9 states in India, the 9 windy states in India. And majority of that happened in Gujarat last year. This is the last financial year. The financial year in India starts from 1st of April and ends on the 31st of the next year. This was the achievement last financial year. This financial year, this is data till the 30th of August, not 30th of September, which is the half yearly, but it's roughly around the same. It's roughly a fraction of what it was last year. Projecting it the way forward, it might be 1/3 or 1/4 of the installations that might happen, that has happened over last year. As regards the targets, the government is severely constrained and it has been constantly been trying to talk to the developers, manufacturers, and the involved financial institutions. The targets for achieving 60 gigawatts of wind is still the same and it has not changed. In fact, very early in this year, there has been a revised target as the future targets in line with the Paris climate change commitment. That is to have the GHG emission intensity of our GDP to be reduced by 35% below the 2005 levels by 2030. And consistent with that, the Prime Minister and the Government of India have set a target to have 450 gigawatts of renewable energy generation by year 2030. The Central Electricity Authority, the planning body of the government, thinks that it is going to be around 140 gigawatts of wind that is going to be by year 2030. The balance majority of it coming from solar, around 300 megawatts. Now, in terms of the tender bids, this slide is little small, but it is essentially from the government website, which essentially indicates that roughly 75% of the bidded out, tendered capacity has been bidded out till date. So of the 12.6 gigawatts that were tendered out, around 9.4 gigawatts have been awarded, and roughly 7.4 gigawatts are the projects which are currently under construction. The various of the projects have just been awarded in the last couple of months. So essentially, we are today around 7.4 gigawatts of capacity is under construction. This is this is being monitored by the Central Electricity Authority, and majority of them have been in this COVID time been affected by the delay in the power sale agreement with the discoms that had happened over the last 6-8 months. Now, in terms of the wind energy tender tariffs, this is an evolution that has happened since the reverse bidding was adopted in 2017, somewhere in February of 2017 until date. If you see the number 3.46, this is rupees per kilowatt hour, Indian rupees. There was 3.46. There was the first one that was bidded out for around 1,000 odd megawatts, 1,050 megawatts. In February of 2017, 3.46. But since then, in all the majority of the tendered bids, the lowest discovered tariff fixed price for 25 years has been fairly constant in a steady band. The average tariff since the beginning of 2017 till now, since when the reverse bidding has happened, has been around 3.8 US dollar cents roughly. This is a very good heartening situation that there's not that much of market volatility here. Now, in terms of what is the COVID situation that happened in India, as you all know, that India had one of the most severest lockdown that happened. And this is very matching with the very high population density and the low public health spend and facilities that are available, apart from the private sector that has been doing damn well, is that there had been a very severe lockdown and everything came to a standstill in an as is what is condition, affecting the whole wind energy sector. Um, After the initial lockdown, the government of India opened up the essential aspects of the economy and allowed them to be operating, and wind energy sector was part of that. Um, the other major part during this COVID situation has been that the government has been in dialogue with the financial institutions, developers, and OEMs, and it is now considered that the COVID-19 lockdown situation will be earmarked as a force majeure situation if there are any such contractual situations that might happen. Also, for for all those projects which fall during this time in contractually to be completing their COD or other things, they have been given extension to be for achieving their project closure for an additional days, more than the lockdown period plus 30 days. Another noteworthy point during the same COVID time, a development that has happened was there was an government-to-government Indo-Danish partnership that came about, which started to really focus on offshore and also with an intention to set up a center for renewable energy excellence, which is going to be covering onshore wind, hybrids, energy storage, essentially to affect optimal grid integration with focus on capacity building, R&D, and testing. So this has been a very good forthcoming thing. Um, and all along the last 6, 7, 8 days since, or 9 months since last 9 months, the government has been very steadfast and has actually reaffirmed their commitment for renewable energy, as I has been mentioning before. Now, in terms of the new initiatives that the government of India has been talking about, as I'm going to be talking about hybrids, RTC, round the clock power, and about offshore wind. This, what I'm trying to talk about is basically about hybrids. Now, what the government of India has realized is standalone wind or a standalone solar, apart from rooftop solar, may not be the full-time solution for all the energy needs in the power system in India, and that there is an advantage of having wind and solar as an hybrid. So there have been, since December of 18, there have been three bids for wind solar hybrid without storage, and these have been awarded, and the tariffs have been ranging from 3.6 to 4.4 US dollar cents, and the last one being in January of 2020. These are wind solar projects without storage. The, the essential logic behind that is that there is certainty with the solar generation, from starting with the sunrise and ending with the sunset. But these needs and development of solar in India has been largely been driven in terms of large infrastructure like solar parks, and they needed huge power evacuation, grid extension kind of an efforts, which have been largely been socialized. But the reason, um, the reason for arguing for having a wind solar hybrid is because the wind generation in terms of a profile diurnally and seasonally has been that it is high in the evenings and early morning. So it's a very good complementary match with the solar generation that happens in the daytime. That enables the utilization of the grid extension that has been done, the grid infrastructure much better. Now, further to that, what the logic the government of India has been thinking is that they need to be, if you are able to add storage, then you could optimize on the dispatch of the generated wind and solar generation, and also on the power evacuation infrastructure. So there has been one major project of around 900 megawatts that was bidded out in March of this year. One was with pump storage and one was with the battery. And there was a price differential, one for the peak time and one was for the off-peak time. The off-peak tariffs were fixed at 4 US dollar cents, and people had to bid for the peak power supply, and there was a very defined window in the morning times and in the evening times to be meeting the morning peak and the evening peak. In addition to that, what the government of India has taken it on record as saying that the way forward is to be looking at hybrid projects and employing the same solar park infrastructure uh, paradigm of development, wherein the land, permits, and power evacuation are all well prepared beforehand and then allotted, tendered, so that the gestation period for the private developers reduce. Is on the same lines. Multi-gigawatt hybrid parks are being planned. What is on record is there are two 25 gigawatt hybrid parks are being planned, one in the northwestern state of Rajasthan and one in the western state of Gujarat. In addition, it is also believed that um, there, in the coming 2 years, there are going to be multiple flexible power, firm dispatch, hybrid projects with storage that are going to come by. One of the immediate ones, which might happen in the very soon, in the next couple of months, is the 1200 megawatts tranche 3 of the SECI hybrid bid, which typically had been only as without storage, but we think that this tranche 3 might have a storage component built in also. Now, in terms of the RTC power, round the clock power, one of the background for this particular slide, which seems to be a little crowded, I will walk you through. In the very beginning, when the National Solar Mission started in 2010, the tariffs for solar PV were very high. One of the ways that the government had thought about was to be using the old depreciated coal-based power plants whose tariffs were around 2 rupees, Indian rupees per kilowatt hour, and bundling it with 3 units of solar and make the average price to be more amenable for customers to have come by. But because of the recent reverse bids and the market discovery of tariff bids, the solar and wind prices have become much cheaper than any new built coal-based power plants or the recently built coal-based power plants. So as a result, what the government has not thought about is to have uh, to be issuing, and this might happen again very soon in the next couple of months, is to be having bundling tender wherein 5 gigawatts of renewable plus coal-based power plants can be bidded as a project. The essential details of that is that wind and solar PV are eligible renewable energy technologies which can be co-located or be placed in the same regional grid where the coal-based power plant is based. The minimum bidding size is around 250 megawatts and the maximum is 5 gigawatts. Already commissioned renewable energy projects or any enhancement of an existing project are not eligible. So renewable energy components have to be newly built. As regards the coal-based power plants, only the unrequisitioned or untied up megawatt capacity outside the long-term PPAs are eligible to be part. The essential criteria for that is that 51% of the annual energy has to be from renewable energy. The balance could be from the coal-based power plant, but the minimum is 51%. And the developers are encouraged, if they find it in whichever way that they want to do, any kind of energy storage solutions to balance and to be able to manage the dispatch of power as per the terms and conditions of the bid. In addition, just recently in May of 2020, a tender titled as RTC was of 400 megawatts. This was awarded at something like 3.8 US dollar cents. This was essentially not an RTC, round the clock firm power, but essentially an high PLF tender where the PLFs needed to be around 80-85%. Though it is so, while it is classified as RTC, it was a learning process for the government and the government bidding agencies to come by. And I think taking cue from that, the next other 5 gigawatts and other bids will be coming by. This will be my last slide. I want to be talking about the offshore wind, and India does present a huge opportunity for offshore wind, especially when the viability and the commercial viability for floating foundations is now getting established and it is becoming a norm for project financing, bank financing across the world. And given also that there are now a great importance and focus being given to the hydrogen, so power to X, the hydrogen production that is going to be possible with respect to large offshore projects. India, as a result, because of its already onshore manufacturing wind capacity of around nearly 10 gigawatts a year, does present a great opportunity to being in a South Asian a hub for manufacturing and the EPC logistics kind of a hub. The government of India was very caught on to this idea. They were probably a little early in and aggressive in setting the targets, and they had set a target to have 5 gigawatts of offshore wind by year 2022, and which is now not possible, and the government recognizes that, and 30 gigawatts by year 2030. In lieu of that, in June of 2018, the government had issued an expression of interest and for international competition, international bid, and there was a huge response to that. The government has been trying to process and to understand what are the things that is there. The government is trying to to reduce the risks of the project so that the tariff bids that the developers will make is going to be far more saner than having to factor in risk, and so that the tariffs are larger. So whether it be the seabed terrain or the geology or the wind conditions or the environmental impact assessments or the planning permissions, the government has been working in trying to get this across and laid such a way that it is going to be a single window kind of a thing. So once it's awarded, it's a kind of only the standard compliances that the bidders will have to be doing, and they can go ahead with construction and commissioning. The due date for the tendering is still to be announced. Then there's not much idea as to when that is going to be happening. I think COVID situation is also has affected this decision making to go ahead on that. As regards the potential, there has been a recent study following the two European Commission projects that happened in India. One was called the Facilitating Offshore Wind in India, called FOWIND, and then there was another subsequent project which was called the First Offshore Wind Project in India, FOPI. And following that, there have been some specific studies done across the two states in India, one the southern state Tamil Nadu and one the western state Gujarat. And 70 gigawatts of offshore potential has been estimated at these places. With this, Stephen, I come to an end to my presentation, and I'm more than willing to take up any questions that you or your viewers or participants may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think this is also impressive figures we heard from you now from India. Great to hear the long-term ambitions on the one hand, also that India is already looking into hybridization of renewable energy, not only looking into wind, but wind and solar and in combination with other technologies. I understand from you that you see some impact of the COVID-19 now this year. You said there is some delay, but not in the mid or long term, which I think is in line with what our previous speaker said, that actually, yeah, wind power has a bright future, obviously, in India as well. You've mentioned the 6.7 gigawatt of wind farms under construction at this point of time. Can you specify how much of that will be finalized this year?
Yeah, to be fair, a lot of this a lot of the 7.3 gigawatts of wind projects which are under construction come under. So these are projects that they have won under the SECI tender bidding framework, and they have, I think, 24 months, in most of the cases, 24 months to achieve the commissioning. Some earlier projects had 18 months. Right away, I can't say how much would be coming up of that would be. See, the last of the bid happened in August of 2020, which is around 970 megawatts. So it's nearly 1 gigawatt. So 1 gigawatt of that capacity will definitely be coming 2 years later. So I could calculate that, but I don't have the figure right away in my head.
If I may ask another question, we heard at a previous webinar that some of the medium, smaller investors, and I know that these are the companies that you have as members, that they are struggling a bit with the auction system in India because prices are going down a lot and they may not be able to compete on that basis. How would you see that situation? Is that something that has a short-term or medium-term or long-term impact?
A very good question, Stephen. I think it has to do a little bit of the framework design of the marketplace. The tariffs have had a dramatic drop in value from where we were before, and it's for the kind of wind regime that we are here, to have such low tariffs is really amazing, and that has happened largely on the fact that the scale of the projects have become so big. To just give you a perspective, by the end of 2015, I had constructed and commissioned and developed, constructed and commissioned and operated 700 megawatts portfolio of wind, and I was the largest asset owner in the country. But if you now come back into 2020, a single project award is of the order of the size 700 megawatts. Now, so the economies of scale are playing greatly in getting the prices low, both in terms of negotiation levels and also in the scale of operations and optimization. So yes, the smaller investors who were earlier doing projects less than 50 megawatt are finding it difficult to be competing with the big boys who are trying to do 702 gigawatt single location projects, and that is becoming a challenge. But I think there is a dialogue that is going on and that is led by IWPA in trying to see as to how there could be a window within the current framework of market mechanism and rules where the smaller guys could be competing and be able to have an option, and so that their small and medium enterprises can gain as before with clean energy small projects that they take on themselves.
Very, very good. And I think very important aspect. And we know this from around the world. We see a comment from Korea. There is a matter of acceptance in Korea as well. That's where we are. That's why we have this topic of community power as something we find important in order to distribute the value created amongst as many as possible. But thanks a lot for your insights. I would also like to welcome here our Vice President from India, and I'm sure you know each other well, Dr. Jami Hossain. Jami, yes.
Hi, Jami.
So Jami, you are, I don't think you are based at the same place, but Jami, just also welcome to you. And if you like to say a few words as well.
Yeah, thank you, Rajsekhar. You spoke very well and very comprehensively about all the major issues and developments in India. A lot of these developments are new, like the hybrids and the RTC, and offshore has been hanging around for a long time, but developments are there. So I think really very good presentation, and it must have been very useful for all the participants. Well, I would just like to add that Stephen and all the other participants, that all these things have been possible. Of course, one major aspect is policy and FIT and the market structure and all these things, but also because of the technology. And the technology has evolved quite significantly, even in India, though we do not have these 5 megawatt wind turbines at the moment, but we have almost wind turbines of the order of 3 megawatt being installed. And we have now technologies which are going to give us something, what we call plant load factor or capacity factor of, something of the order of 40% plus. So Rajsekhar, who is handling one of the IPPs, would be knowing better than me what kind of technologies are there and what kind of capacity factors are there. So as we move higher in the capacity factor, 40%, 50%, then we are almost coming close to thermal. Thermal is 60% on an average, 65% on an average in India. So this is a big thing. And once we combine solar and wind, so we are almost talking about farm power from renewable energy, which will go a long way in meeting our power requirements. And probably, I think soon enough we will forget about coal. So let us hope so. And of course, offshore is there, and floating is a good idea. So thank you, Rajsekhar, very well, and thanks. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. And then let's make a very small announcement at this point of time, and you will all get to know more information. Jami, I think we can just mention that at this point of time that we're planning to have our next World Wind Energy Conference in India, and we'll come back to you with more information in very soon, and contact, of course, some of you bilaterally in the next couple of days.
Yeah, so Stephen is cooking something. He'll come up very fast. Yeah.
Excellent. So thank you so much to India, which is, as I think at the moment still in terms of population, the second, but soon the largest in terms of population, overtaking China in terms of population. Hopefully then soon the race starts, who will have more installed wind and solar capacity.